Hello and welcome to Maya with Haste. George here, and in this video we're going to take a look at accessing vertex, edge, and face information, or the components of an object. If you haven't already watched the videos on how to make a primitive, please do so now. Let's add a primitive to our scene. I'm just going to use the shelf to quickly add a cube. Hit the F key to frame up on that object. I'm going to hit the Q key to go into selection mode. Now the important thing to understand is there are two modes in Maya when you're dealing with objects. There is the object mode, which is where we're moving all of these points together as one unit. And then there's component mode, where we're accessing the individual pieces of that object and manipulating them. So when you hit W, E, and R with your keyboard and bring up those different transform gizmos, you're moving this object as a whole. If I only want to move a portion of this object, I need to go into component mode. The fastest way to go into component mode is hit F8 on your keyboard. F8 will bring you into the last kind of component you are working with. So in my case, those were edges. However, if you wanted to work with vertices or faces, how do you get there? Maya's menus are context sensitive, meaning depending upon what you're doing, the menus will change. Right now I have nothing selected, so if I right click on my scene, I get this complete tool or select all tool. Not what I want. I want something that is explained to me what components I can access. So let's select this object by left clicking on it or marquee selecting over it. Now if I right click anywhere, I get substantially more information. It knows I have a polygonal object selected, and it's giving me options for handling that object. Already you can see we have vertices, edges, and faces, as well as several other parameters. We also have the ability to go back to object mode. Let's go into vertex mode. So now that I'm in vertex mode, each of these points can now be selected. You know you're in component mode because the outlines of the object, that are the edges, changes from that green color to this light blue color. In addition, all of the points now become accessible as these small purple squares. We can select them all together, and then use our transforms so we can hit W, E, and R to manipulate them. We can access these components one at a time or grab a whole bunch of them and move them together. Now we can use our gizmo tools just like before by selecting an axis and moving them in any direction. Now this method is great because it allows you to construct slightly more complicated shapes out of simple primitives, although it doesn't quite give you a whole lot of power, meaning you're still going to need to learn some other tools in order to carve this geometry up and add more detail. Please do not make a cube with 100,000 faces or points in it and then try to create a character out of that. In later videos, we'll discuss how we can use the 3D modeling tools to do that. To add more detail, we have to do quite a bit more, meaning we need to slice it up and extrude objects and faces. Nothing we're covering just yet. Now this square is pretty simple. Let's add something a little bit more complicated, like a sphere to our scene. Hit the F key to frame up. Hit the F8 key to go back to our component mode with the last type of component being used, in our case vertices. Now if we select on any one of these points and we move it around, that's okay, but imagine having to select all these points individually and clicking on them. By the way, I'm holding the Shift key and clicking to add more points to my selection. But if I do this, that's pretty rough. I'd have to, slowly move each point along the border to make it smooth. There's a better way of handling this. If we double click on our tool over here, our transform tool, what we'll get is the tool settings dialog. If you make a selection and then scroll on down to soft selection and expand it and click soft selection, what you'll notice is instead of just selecting one object, we actually have this sort of fanning out of colors. Each of the edges becomes more and more intense, meaning towards yellow, as we get closer to our selection. And of course it gets darker and darker all the way out from our object. This is showing you the influence of your actions on that object. So here we can see that as I'm pulling that one point out, all of the other points around it are being pulled out, and how much they're being pulled out is a weight based upon a few parameters we have here. The first parameter you're going to want to mess with is the fall off radius. We can change this to different values depending upon the scale of our scene. Here at 0.5, we'll notice that we're influencing far less of this mesh. The next thing you're going to want to mess with is the fall off mode. In this case, it's set to volume, and what that means is it does a distance calculation to all the points around it, and depending upon how close it is to any of these points, it will influence them. Now surface takes the connectivity of the mesh into consideration. So for instance, let's go to volume really quick and make my object a little bit larger. And what I'm going to do is actually just kind of take it and push it in on itself. I'm going to push it in on itself and then push it over a bit. Now I'm going to unselect that point and then reselect it. What you'll notice here is that I'm not only selecting that point, but I'm also selecting all these points along the side of the object because based upon the volume, those are connected together as far as this operation is concerned. They are close enough together to where I will influence it. If you go to surface mode though, this constrains your transforms to only being along the surface of the object, meaning that points have to have direct connections between them to have the influence affect them. So here we can see that in order for these points over here to be influenced, I have to go 0.75 units across the surface, up and along and over, and I never quite get there over here. This can be very important to understand. A lot of times when you're dealing with characters, their feet or legs will be close to each other, and you want to make sure you're working on the surface so that you don't accidentally move parts that you don't want to. Now let's go ahead and hit F8 to go to object mode, delete that object out. Let's just add a simple cube back in here. Let's right click on it, go to edge mode. Edges, of course, I have soft selection still on. Let's turn that off. So edges, of course, allow you to select 2 vertices at a time. Great for quick manipulation. Now, a nice trick when you're dealing with edges, especially, is to use the scaling operator to make them closer or pinch them together. So instead of going to vertex mode and maybe grabbing one point, moving it over, and then grabbing the other point, moving that one over, we can just, of course, go to edge mode and scale them together. Now, another trick you could have used in vertex mode is by grabbing both vertices and then, of course, just scaling them together like so. Or grabbing all of them and then doing a scale together. The last mode we're going to look at in this video is the face mode. So face mode allows you to select all the face information right here. You grab that face and you can manipulate it all as one unit. Great for moving around 4 or 3 points technically, because the reality is this face is cut up into triangles. You just don't get to see it. Anyway, that's a quick and dirty look at how to manipulate edges, faces, and vertices inside of an object, accessing them by using the F8 hotkey to go back and forth, or of course using this menu by selecting the object, right-clicking, and bringing it up. Now this is just the very beginning. This is how you access that information. In the following video, we're going to take a look at popular mesh tools that allow us to build more of the mesh, extrude the mesh out, pull out shapes, or slice it. Remember, if you enjoyed this video and you want more, like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.